After a long, hot summer here in Austin, Texas, I woke up this morning to a cool, brisk 63 degrees. And you know what that means? Autumn has arrived! So I popped out of bed like a 3-year-old, ran to the kitchen, and cranked up the oven because today I'm bringing you something that's full of autumnal goodness. A special little treat that fits right inside the palm of your hand. Let's get started. Even though this recipe is essentially a dump and stir, there are a couple ingredients that I want to show you how to prep properly. Starting with the carrot. Now, I do have a food processor, and you might think to yourself, well, why not just blitz it and grate it with a food processor? The problem with that is when you do that with a carrot, it just juices the heck out of it. So what I want to do is use the microplane on my box grater. If you have one of these, you can use that, but if you're in the market for a new box grater, this microplane is really lovely. And what I like to do is go down every single time with the carrot, but then I'm not just keeping the pressure against the grater. That will also juice it. I'm actually pulling it up just a little bit between each time of pressing it through and grating. And what I'm looking for is 1/2 cup of microplaned carrot. All right, that looks about right. One of the cool things about the microplane box grater is this. What? Super easy. So that portion doesn't really have to be cleaned very much. I can use the back of my knife, scrape that off. And I'm looking for 1/2 cup true, but you don't really want to pack the bejeegers out of it, okay? Just enough to really fill it up, but without kind of juicing it. And if you have just a touch more like that, that'll work great in this muffin recipe, okay? So we'll push that off to the side. Simple cleanup, chef snack, and then the old bench scraper keeps it nice and clean, okay? 1/2 cup, ready to go. Next thing is toasted salted pecans or pecan halves. Now, I do have some pecans that I'll add later on, but I'll blitz those up. But these pecan halves, I want you to get a little bit of texture, okay? Now, the texture I'm looking for with these pecans is finely chopped. If I were to blitz this in the food processor, you might get dust, you might get big chunks. So running your knife through it slowly a couple of times will get you the results that you want. That looks great. Everything's nice and uniform. No really big pieces left. And no dust either. So that's a good little halfway point. So when you get that bite of this delicious muffin, you get a little bit of texture, but not a big chunk, okay? One more thing. We are talking about the unsung hero, which has this sweetness, but also this lovely heat that comes through it. That is candied ginger. Now, the candied ginger, all I need is 1/4 cup of small dice. What do I mean by that? I mean, yeah, small. So what I like to do with the candied ginger is line them up and then just carefully cut them into these long strips. When the strips are cut, then I can just cut them across the strips in these tiny little cubes, and that's what I'm looking for. So we'll turn them all at 90 degrees. Don't try to cut it all at once. I mean, it's a fair amount of ginger. And we'll just cut them into these tiny little cubes. So with every muffin that you eat, with every bite of every muffin, you'll get a little bit of heat, some sweetness, carrot, crunch from the nut. There's a lot going on in these muffins. And we only need 1/4 cup. The rest of these are some snacks that we can have later on. Who doesn't love a good snack? So these ingredients are prepped. Now, next step is getting on to making the batter. I have my food processor plugged in with the blade attachment. And this is super easy. This is essentially a dump and pulse. Pulsing, first and foremost, some brown sugar and toasted salted pecans. They go in, and I'm gonna pulse it until it's uniformly cut together, okay? That looks great. Perfect. Next will be the dry ingredients. Well, what would that be? We have some salt, also have cinnamon, I mean, what's autumn without cinnamon? And also a little bit of baking powder that goes in. Then a cup of all-purpose flour that goes in. I'm going to pulse all of this together until it's pretty much uniform as well. Everything is equally distributed. That's great. Dump and pulse continues. We have a whole stick of butter that I've cut into 16 equal pieces. And the reason for that is I can just push them around the inside. When it gets pulsed again, it's not just one big clunk of butter chunking around on the inside. And we continue the pulsing game until it's uniformly distributed yet again. Now that's perfect. It looks like wet sand. The sand, the ocean comes in and it starts to dry out and it kind of crumbles like that. And that's exactly what we want, like a wet sand. Because as I'm pulsing, everything kind of shoots up to the side, so it's like a cone. So what I want to do is flatten this out. Right? Doesn't take but a couple seconds. And the reason for that is that I'm going to add the eggs now. 2 large eggs and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. This is my monster homemade vanilla extract. So look, one for the chef, one for the muffins. 1 teaspoon of that. Look at this. You save that vanilla bean from itself. And the reason why I flatten it out is that normally when you pulse it, it immediately sucks the eggs under. So I want to give it just a couple of fighting chances so that the eggs don't get sucked underneath the blade. And we'll pulse this until it's a pretty thick, uniform batter. That's it. Pulse and go. That's what it's all about. The batter is done. Now we get on to actually pulling the whole thing together and then scooping them on into those muffin tins. The thing that makes these muffins so delicious are all the incredible add-ins. So we already prepped a couple things. We have the batter. A few things you haven't seen. Dried currants, just love little bite explosions of flavor and sweetness, like chewiness. And I also have some oats, old-fashioned oats, that I lightly toasted in the oven earlier, okay? So we have the oats and the currants, the pecans that we chopped. They go in. We also have the candied ginger that we did a small dice on, that gentle sweet heat, and then of course this beautiful microplaned carrot. Now gently fold these together, okay? Because some of these ingredients are a little bit sticky, like the currants are sticky, and also the candied ginger is sticky. So instead of like squishing them together, I actually kind of want to aerate it. You want to fold it the same way for all of you bakers out there that you would make, say, a meringue. You want to gently turn and fold, turn and fold. And if you find that the carrot isn't kind of incorporating quite the way you want it to, you can also, much like making sushi rice, take your spatula and use it like a blade. Just gently cut through it, like you're cutting through rice. You're not crushing it, you're just cutting it. So you're separating all the ingredients together so that when you mix it all together with this batter, it's much more uniform. Now that looks like a really lovely bed for this batter to go in. Right? It is a thick batter, so what I like to do is take my finger, put it right in the bottom, and I'm holding on to that blade. I'm holding it in so it doesn't just goop out. And I'm just going to add it to this bowl and then fold it all together. Make sure you get every last little teaspoon because muffins, they're not very big. In fact, these muffins, when you spoon them into the little containers, it's just a little bit more than a 1/4 cup. And then when they're all filled in evenly, you don't have to smooth out the top, just put all the ingredients, make sure they're pretty evenly distributed between the muffin tins. And then we're gonna bake it for 25 minutes at 350 degrees middle rack. 25 minutes are up. I pulled them out of the oven, but I didn't start eating them then. In fact, what you want to do is pull the whole thing out and let it rest on top of the cooling rack for 5 whole minutes. The reason for that is that it's a gentle transition from the oven to room temperature and resulting in better texture. But after those 5 minutes, you can remove them from the actual pan itself, put them on the cooling rack, and then it is a free-for-all. Now you can just dive in and have a great time. The great thing about these muffins is there's so much flavor packed into this tiny little handful. And P.S. the kitchen smells amazing. The first thing I get is like three things at once. I get the cinnamon, I get that gentle heat from the ginger, and I also get the brown sugar, which lends like this depth, this sweetness and depth. It's not just sweet, but it has like a molasses finish right there. Then I get sort of the chewy molasses coming off onto the black currants, which is really lovely. Then the nuttiness, the saltiness from that salted toasted pecan rounds the whole thing out. And you know what? One of the best things about this recipe is you now have 11 opportunities to make somebody's day. 10, 9 opportunities.